I'm Bonnie. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter, where we take the mystery out of the tarot and help you bring this ancient practice into everyday life. In this podcast, we'll talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So grab your tarot deck, get comfortable, and start your journey to tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. I'm Bonnie, and today we're going to be talking about the eights in tarot. So we'll give you a general overview of what the eight means, and then we're going to go into each card from each suit, and then give you a bit more information about what that card is. And then what we're going to do is give you some practical ways that you can use those cards. So I'm going to start by giving you a general overview of what the eights are. And I always like to bring numerology into the equation. As Peter knows, I love numerology, and it just ties in so beautifully with the tarot. So it makes me super, super happy to align those two energies. So if we look at the eight in numerology and in tarot, we can see a lot of similarities. So if you think about the eight, it's almost like an infinity symbol, right? So it never really ends. So if you think about this energy that's constantly moving, that really is the energy of the eight. What I also like to think about the eight is that it's how we use and how we view our power. And we're going to notice that as we go through each card and each suit. But the eight is really about like how we stand in our own power and how we use that. We can either use our power and stand in that, or we can give it away to other people. So it's a very interesting energy with the eight. The eights can be really strong, really dynamic, or you can look at the eight as something that really disempowers you if you're on that side of the eight. So they're very complex, but full of so much information. And I do actually like seeing the eights showing up in a reading because there is movement. There's this idea of power. There's a lot of introspection too with the eights. If we bring it again back to numerology, when we think of the eight, that's a lot of where our success comes from, how we create abundance, how we view abundance in our life. So there's also a lot of material wealth that comes with the eights. So in thinking about how we view material wealth, and as we go through the cards as well, will be an interesting take to see how that all comes into play. So that's kind of a bit of an overview of what I think about the eights. And I know that you have your own perspective too, Peter. So what would you say about a general overview of the eights?
Well, I mean, some of the words that you use, you talk about the idea of the infinity symbol, and power. I love that idea of, it identifies how we stand in our own power, because some of the words that I would think of with the eights in general would fall inside that category as well. Like I think of the idea of either a reassessment or a reevaluation or a repetition, which would be completely linked to that idea of that infinity flow. Flow is another word that I would use as well, that, around the eights, that it is often about an energetic flow. Another word that I think is akin to the eights is manifestation. With eights, we use our power, to borrow your word, to make things happen. And if we're giving our power away, then perhaps what the eights are doing as well is they're identifying a spot where our power is being taken away from us, right? So, or where something is being manifested for us outside of our own power. We're losing our agency. But that concept of agency and manifestation really does sit inside the eights. But I haven't touched on the key word that I would, when I teach my classes, the key word I always use with the eights is movement. And I think it's a key theme, and I think, and as I go through each of the cards in my head, I think they can define pure movement. It can define a need for movement. It can define steady progress or movement forward, or it can define the idea of, kind of moving away from, right? The idea of abandonment and kind of leaving things behind. So that necessity of movement, that concept of movement, for me, really sits inside all four eights. And I know you mentioned, you know, liking to see the eights. I'm the same. I like seeing the eights show up because although clarity isn't necessarily a concept that I would associate with the eights, all four eights in the tarot are usually quite clear in their message, even if they need to rely on other cards. If you're working with a spread or working with the narrative of other cards, the message of the eights is usually, pretty clear. It's not, it's not like drawing a five of something. We're like, oh, what's this about? The eights usually have an element of clarity to them as well. So like you, I'm often pleased to see an eight show up. So
We have a lot to learn from the eights, I think. And I love that you brought up manifestation. And that is so true in terms of that relationship with numerology as well. So thank you for that reminder, because how we manifest, I mean, you can manifest wonderful things when you're thinking positive things, but you can also manifest the not so great things if we're in that feeling of lack, or that we don't have control, or that we don't have power. So thank you for that reminder.
Well, and thank you, because you just reminded me as well, because the idea of manifestation is often the end result of magical work. That when we're trying to engage ourselves in something magical, we are in many ways trying to manifest something. And eight is a very magical number. I think of the 8 cycles of the moon, for example. And the other example I'd come up were the 8 points of the pagan or Wiccan calendar or wheel of the year, with the 2 equinoxes, the 2 solstices, and then the midpoints in between that. That number, that concept of 8 is often used in magical work, with the idea of manifestation as well. So, they're all great words. And I'm curious to see, as we dig deeper into each of the cards,
what's going to come out.
What's going to come out. Exactly.
I know. That's why I love this, because we learn so much from each other. And sometimes just hearing it from a different point of view, it gives you so much more clarity. So
yeah, and I agree. Because I think it's one of the joys I get out of doing this podcast is that we, because I think we both have a lot to offer from the tarot, but we do come at it from a somewhat different perspective. And sometimes I get lost, because as people, though, we will prep ahead of time, but we're not prepping a ton of stuff. It's not like we say, oh, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what you're going to talk about. And I sometimes lose myself when I'm listening to you talk, because I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I'm learning so much. It's like, oh, hold on a second. At some point in time, I've got to do my piece on whatever the card is. So it's a great, look, we love doing the podcast, but it's always it's great to learn from it as well. I learn tons every time we hit the record button. So
me too. And I feel the exact same way, even listening to them after. I'm like, oh my God, that's so smart. So I surprised myself too, like when I'm hearing both of us speak. So I love that.
Yeah. All right. So
we're going to start with the wands, right?
Yep, we are.
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Of all the 8s, I think the 8 of Wands might be the easiest one to start with, because for me, this card is the concept of pure movement. It is, I think, if the idea, the concept of moving existed in a card, it exists in this one. I even think of, I think it's Crowley in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, who refer to this card as swift or swiftness. So I think, the 8 encourages us to move, and usually it is quick movement, swift movement. So kind of combining those two. So, if we get an 8 of Wands coming, something is coming at us and it's coming fast, or, it's an invitation for us to move, and usually move quickly. The other thing, though, is it can be, because it's so fast, is it can be fleeting as well. It can also be the 8 of Wands can also represent a very superficial energy. So, if we want to talk about the, whatever it is that it's impacting, it may be because we are moving too quickly. So, and part of the reason why I always see this card as one of pure energy is that it is only in the Rider-Waite-Smith, and usually decks that kind of follow the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, the Eight of Wands often depicts no characters whatsoever. It often has no people in it. So to me, that really does lend itself well to a card that is, to quote, I think it was a dance hit in the 80s called Pure Energy. It is clearly a song. So you're here, there we go. My musical my musical brain. It is clearly a card that depicts pure energy of movement. The last thing I'd say about it is it is, if cards are on its own, it probably leans between like neutral and positive energy. Although again, when you're using this, when the Eight of Wands shows up with other cards, it might be movement that's problematic. It could be movement that is fleeting. It could be movement that is that's happening without direction. But usually this is good movement. It's a call for us to get something going quickly, or that something's coming at us pretty quickly. I don't know. What about you? What do you think with the Eight?
Yep, it's fast.
It's fast, right?
For sure. Fast moving energy. I see this card as momentum, and this idea that there's a ton of momentum that is happening right now, whether you see it or whether you don't. So if you're waiting for something to happen, if we think about the Seven of Pentacles, for example, we're kind of waiting. If we're moving now into the Eight of Wands, it's like, okay, it's coming. You may not see it, but it's coming really soon. I also think of it as like the time is now. So if there's something that you're thinking about doing, there's action, like take action now, because it could be gone. Like, because it's so fast, it's coming in so strong. Don't lose this opportunity to make a move or do that thing. So it's kind of like sometimes I have sayings that go for different cards. So for me, this is the like strike while the iron is hot card, right? Like you got to do it. Like this is that go for it card. I also see this as my trip card. So
yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was like, I forgot to mention the idea,
going on a trip. So if this card comes up for people that I'm reading for, I'll always mention that and be like, sometimes this card can mean a trip. And like, I'm almost going to say 100% of the time, because whenever I say this, people are like, yeah, I'm going to Florida, or I have a cruise booked. Like, it always has that significance. Or they were thinking of like, oh, I'm thinking about going to Mexico. So I usually might bring up something. I mean, it doesn't always have to mean that, but quite often it could be that. So Eight of Wands energy is.
Yep, it is. I had it show up one morning, my card of the day, and Kelly and I were leaving for Australia, and I was like, the Eight of Wands showed up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I know exactly what this means. So I forgot about the idea of travel. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And I often think it's travel by air, not because the wands are an air suit, they're a fire suit, but because usually the wands are flying through the air. So.
Yep. Yeah. And then also too, it's like the perfect time to seize an opportunity. So that's sort of the other, when you get this card, it's almost like an ace, right? Like in being like, okay, there's all this stuff happening, do it, right? Like you're getting that permission slip to go ahead and do it. So
that's an interesting, because because I think it's an exceptionally powerful card. I'd almost think it's like having 8 aces sort of combined. It's like an ace multiplier. And it's really interesting, because for a lot of the cards, it's what it looks like. It just looks like 8 single wands.
Well, and I think I've read somewhere too where they talk about the Ace of Wands as being like having 8 like magic wands, right? Yeah. And it's like there's so much going on right now. It's like all that energy can sometimes be overwhelming and hard to contain, but sometimes we need that energy to give us that push to move forward. So
yeah, and that is the one thing with the Eight of Wands, is that it can at times be too much. It can, I'd mentioned that early on, that the movement itself can be too quick. It can be fleeting and happen very quickly, like the blink and you'll miss it kind of, statement that I think you had made earlier as well. So it can be, and we had talked originally about the idea of manifestation with the eight. So this is the invitation to be able to take this energy and to be able to
Mhm.
use it, because the Eight of Wands is saying that fast moving energy is around you somewhere. Find
Yeah,
out, figure out where it is, and then put it to work.
exactly.
Mm.
Okay, so how would you
How would you
use
put it to work?
how would you put it to work, Peter?
Look, so I this is an interesting one, because I think the eights, because of their power, and from a magical perspective, because of their power of manifestation, which was one of the first words I had talked about, I would probably use all the eights in the same way. So I always think, if you're looking to create something. Let me see if I can use a practical example with the Eight of Wands. Well, we talked about this idea of being a trip, right? So if you were
Oh,
doing,
you're stealing mine.
oh, am I okay? Never mind. Then you
No,
go
it's okay.
ahead. No,
It's
no, no,
okay.
no. Go, 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 go. I won't use the trip. Then I'll borrow from, because I was originally thinking of one that would be probably would more link to the Eight of Pentacles. But again, I think with the energy of the eight, it's, and we'll talk about this with each of the cards, even though the meaning is different, often that energy, that requirement to manifestation and movement is the same. So I think because the eights, and when we say manifest, we mean make something happen, right? The invitation to make something happen.
Mhm.
So the eights are a great card to think about. And I was thinking about a savings plan. So, I thought, if you were wanting to, and I think about something that, I had done, and when we get to the Eight of Pentacles, I'll tell this story because it does a good job of sort of helping explain this. But, if you were like, okay, I'm going to try and use the energy and the power of the number eight. So if I'm planning for something, how can I divide that up into an 8-month plan, or an 8-week plan, or an 18-week plan, something where the number eight is? And how could I take something like $8, $80, $800 in each little chunk of time and be able to create that energy using the eights in general? So
Mm.
when you talk about something like the Eight of Wands, then it might be, okay, what fast moving energy can I help manifest? And how can I use the number eight in as many ways as possible to be able to make that happen? And then, as I have mentioned in many episodes before, then the card itself becomes almost a visual talisman to be able to help, bring forward the energy that we want. I think it's one of the most maybe underused but most powerful uses of the tarot in general, is as a visual, I'll use the word talisman, to be able to help us move towards manifestation. Right. So I know that didn't quite answer how I would use the Eight of Wands. I'm going to rely on you to do that, because I will go back to that idea of using the eights themselves, as a tool for, power and manifestation. And again, the reason why I talked about that repetitive behavior, that, I'm going to figure out an 8-month plan, and I'm going to put $800 a month away because I want a trip that's going to cost me X amount of money, or whatever it happens to be, is
Mhm.
that concept of cycle and repetition is also a concept that sits inside the eights as well. Right.
Mhm.
So I know that's big surprise, surprise. That's more theoretical and heady than it is practical, but
No, but it helps
keep in
you
mind where
come
it's
up
coming
with
from.
different ideas. And I love that you're talking about maybe, putting money away, because the eights are a lot about how we manifest material
True.
things in our life,
Correct.
or success and
Yeah.
money, right?
Mhm.
If we think about the eight, like from a numerological perspective, it's like the CEO card, right? It's like the leader, the one who makes the money and, gets things done. So I think that's a really practical way. So
Yeah,
lots of good ideas.
because the movement exists in the eight. When we think what comes after the eight, the nine, and the 10, we're
Mhm.
almost already there. Like, we're basking in the glory of whatever it happens to be, or we're consumed with over consumption, overabundance. We're the eight really is that final stage of getting stuff done, right? So using that energy to get stuff done, is important. So I guess for me, if we were looking at Eight of Wands, for example, you would talk about, the idea of a performance. So, if I was going to do that and I was thinking, all right, I'm in a band, you can see I've changed my office around. For those of you watching, my keyboards are flashing around in the background. I would think about, and I've never done this, so maybe I'm gonna have to do that. I would think about breaking perhaps rehearsals down into categories of eight, and I might think of songs for a particular set and say 8 weeks now I want them down pat. So let me get my practical schedule so that I can do my own home practice. I'd put that Eight of Wands card up there on my music stand, and I would know, and maybe it's at 8 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it's at 8 minutes after 1 in the afternoon, or maybe it's at 8 p.m. for 88 minutes. However it is that I want to use that eight. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I can't stress enough the power of that number. So, what about you from the Eight of Wands?
Well, this isn't going to be a big surprise. But I would say, because there's so much movement in this card, like quick movement, and because I talked about a trip, I would say if you want to plan like a last minute trip somewhere, or you're just like, oh, I have some time, let's see what kind of specials there are for like a last minute deal, pull out your Eight of Wands and then see if you can plan like a last minute trip, or even you want to make a reservation at a restaurant and it's kind of last minute. So like maybe pull out the energy of the Eight of Wands and see if you can use that energy to plan that. So kind of like using it in a fun way to plan something last minute, but using the energy and the momentum in that card. So that's kind of lame.
No, I love that because, I've got a favorite restaurant here in town that sometimes is hard to get into. I'm going to do that. If it's last minute, I'm pulling the Eight of Wands. I love that suggestion. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. It just reminded me because we're still sort of on holiday break as we record this. And my youngest daughter the other day, she was like, "Hey, why don't we go to New York City?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, we'll just." But then it got me thinking. I'm like, "Hey, let's go to Vegas." And I went online and I was looking to see for last minute trips. Obviously, it didn't pan out, and we're not going to Vegas. But I was like, "Oh, how fun would that be? Just to plan something last minute, if you have some time off." So.
Totally. But you didn't check New York City, though. Maybe New York City was the place to go, right?
Well, not over New Year's. I was like, I don't want to be anywhere near New York City, like around New Year's.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Okay. Eight of Cups.
Eight of Cups. There you go. That's to you. You want to start us off?
That's to me. Yeah. Okay. You get the fast one. I got the like, oh, okay. Eight of Cups. You know what? I do like the Eight of Cups. And again, I like the energy of the eights, even though sometimes they could be a little bit difficult. But when we see the Eight of Cups, it really is this idea of movement. It's this idea of leaving something behind so that you can start something new, or you can go in a different path, on a different journey. So a couple of different ways that we can look at this. If you're in a situation that isn't serving you, the situation could be a situation. It could be a relationship. It could be an emotion that you're holding on to. This is a really good time to look at that and then be like, time for me to move on from this. And again, if it's just a thought pattern that you have or a belief system, it's like, okay, I don't need to keep thinking that same way. I can find a new path. So it's really about leaving something behind in search of something else, or doing something that's going to serve you. But it doesn't always have to be the somber way of looking at the card, because this card is also about going on a path and something in search of something new. It could be leaving the comfort of your situation. Like everything is good. You've kind of accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish, but there's still something else that's out there. And it might not make sense to you, or people might go, "Oh my gosh, are you crazy? Like you're actually going to leave all this to go do that thing?" But if that's what you need to do, then again, this is a card that's going to help you look at that and be like, what is it that I have to let go of or leave behind in order to go on, like, again, a different path, a different journey, whatever that is for you. So it is really this idea of leaving something behind. to get something else. And it doesn't always have to be sad. And again, for me, when I get this card, it's always like, what thoughts aren't serving me, or what emotions am I holding on to, or what memory, right? Like, because this is the Suit of Cups, this is often associated with relationships, our emotions, even our intuition. Sometimes it's not trusting our intuition, like letting that idea of like, oh, I really can't trust my intuition, to be like, I'm now gonna like lock arms with my intuition and move forward. So that's my interpretation of the Eight of Cups. What do you think, Peter?
I love that, and I love that you mentioned that it's not always bad. So I would probably say ditto to everything you said. So I'll just add maybe some different things, because I think that sometimes what it represents as well, it certainly represents the idea of moving away from. There's no question there. Even just the visual representation of most cards show exactly that. They show somebody leaving something behind. But it also, when we talk about the idea of eights being cyclical and repetitive, that this may also represent the emotional end of a cycle, that it might be, something that has actually served us well, and that it no longer serves us. So it's served us emotionally in all likelihood because we're cups, or intuitively, it served us in a way that makes sense for this suit, and that it no longer serves us. And sometimes the Eight of Cups is there as a reminder to say, you're actually hanging on to something that no longer serves you from a purely emotional perspective. That if you looked at this in any other way, from a practical perspective, if you looked at it from an intellectual perspective, everything would tell you time to go. When the Eight of Cups comes, sometimes it's a reminder to say the last little string that's preventing you from moving away is the heartstring. So that's the one thing. The other thing, and again, Bonnie, to borrow language that you use often, is this can be a card of gratitude. It can be a card that says, thank you for everything, and now I'm moving on. And things ending and us moving away from things, it's not a bad thing. It's, the extreme of this card, I guess, is the idea of abandonment. But this card often represents willfully, moving away from something that no longer serves. And then the last point, because again, I agree with everything you said. The one thing that I would add is so whatever deck you're using, check the Eight of Cups and see if there's not an eclipse in the sky in the card. Because Pamela Coleman Smith drew an eclipse at the top of the Eight of Cups. An eclipse is an exceptionally powerful time. So what the presence of the eclipse does is it also highlights the power of this card. And power is a theme that we have said again and again and again with all of the eights. So that's kind of where I would come out with the Eight of Cups. It's a card that often looks bleak when you look at it and it comes up. I do client work sometimes, and Eight of Cups comes up and they'll look at it and go, oh my God, what is this? And it's like, you want to say no, actually, and then, talk a little bit about things that need to be let go. And almost always, somebody comes to the realization of what that thing happens to be. That, we are just usually hanging on, and usually hang on for emotional reasons, because that's often the last, kind of thing that keeps us gripped to something. That's like, yeah, but I like it, or I love it so much, or it's memories, it's nostalgia. Again, the Land of Cups, and all the other elements would be there saying, cut the string, and it served its purpose, right? So
I love that. And thank you so much for the reminder about, it's not like when we have to walk away from something, sometimes we view that as like a failure. Oh, this didn't work out, it's a failure, now I have to move on. And what you said that so beautifully, and I often say that too with this card. It's like you had to go through everything you went through to get to this point. Like, you're leaving with you with experience. And, even if it was a relationship that didn't work out, well, now you have that experience to move forward, to find something that does serve you or that makes you happy, right? So it doesn't have to be disempowering when you're moving on. It's actually very powerful to be like, this isn't working for me anymore. Like if it's that type of situation, now I'm ready to move on. So that's where you can really harness that power and the strength to be
Mhm.
able to do that, which is part of the energy of the eight. So thank you for
Oh, yeah, of course.
reminding us.
Well, and sometimes it's not the challenge. I think with the eight is at times it's either difficult to see, or it's impossible to see in the moment. So sometimes it is a long term sort of reflective card. It's certainly a reflective emotional card where we go back and say, okay, yeah, now I know why this Eight of Cups showed up, and it was the first signal of the time that this is now no longer a situation that serves me well. And
Mhm.
thank you for whatever it is that you brought into my life. And you talk about the idea of relationships, and we've all had them where they end. I kind of tease Kelly all the time and say every relationship ends, right? It has to end, right? It has to end. We are finite beings. I don't mean to get philosophical, but they all end.
Mhm.
So being grateful for what a relationship has brought into our lives, however short or however long it was, is what the energy of that Eight of Cups, or part of what that energy is for. That's why I had used a word that you often use, the idea of gratitude, is it can be an invitation to be, yeah, I'm grateful for, and I'm moving on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's
All
great.
right. So
Okay.
how do we use it?
How do we use it? I know there's a lot of ways you can use this card. I might just go like the general mainstream, how, the most obvious way. But I would say if you're having a hard time letting go of like a grudge or a resentment, because that's also part of letting go. You might not necessarily be leaving a situation, but you're letting something go that's holding on to you and it has an emotional hold on you. I would pull out this card and be like, how can I let go of this grudge or resentment that I'm holding against a person, or it could even be myself, or, really looking at situations that you beat yourself up over, that things that have happened in the past. How can you forgive yourself and let that go so that it doesn't have that hold on you anymore? So I would use the card in that way.
I love that. I love that. I'll get maybe tangible in this card only because I think the image of the card allows that. I would find eight containers, eight eight
I
cups,
love how
eight
you're so
bowls.
literal, Peter.
Well, because sometimes the cards invite that.
Yeah.
So if we talk about the idea of gratitude, if we're prepared, because sometimes the hardest thing to do is to be at peace with letting something go. So
Yes.
my suggestion would be pull the card out, pull out eight. It can be anything, right? Anything that can hold eight small pieces of paper. Write down eight things that you're grateful for that this situation brought you. Put it
Mm.
somewhere and literally walk away from it. Whether you
I
put it
love
into a
that.
room, put it into a room, leave the room. Put it at the front of your house, walk away and take a walk. Leave it behind you. So in a lot of ways, and for this, I'll always thank James Wells, who was one of the first tarot practitioners who I had ever seen talk about the physical manifestation of images in the card. I think it was probably at one of the, well, would have been at Reader Studio 2010, which is the only one I attended. But there were practitioners there that would talk about the idea of physically recreating the images in cards. And I won't lie that the concept of it was, the time it was introduced to me, I was extremely skeptical. And then when you do it and you use it, the power, which is an eight word, right? The power of both the image that, especially if you're using tarot a lot, that's very familiar to you, and the action, like it's you almost recreating the action inside the card, can be an exceptionally powerful tool for manifestation, which is what we're talking about in the eight. So that's my offering in this one. I promise you the other ones will not be anywhere near as creative. So
No, I think that's amazing, Peter. Very, very
walk away.
insightful. And
Yeah, just walk away.
uh, yeah, yeah, exactly. I love that.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you. The ideas are always helpful. I love it when, you share your ideas as well, because I think I've told you I've used a few of them now. So
That's what we do. We try to teach people.
teach
We try
people,
to
yeah,
help people.
including each other. All right. So
Okay, Eight of Swords.
is that me? Are we? I've lost track now.
I
So
think it's you.
okay, all right. So I've talked about the idea of movement, and this is
Mhm.
probably the one where most people would be, Peter, what the hell are you talking about? Movement in the Eight of Swords. But the Eight of Swords to me highlights a need to move, right? We feel like we can't move. We feel trapped. We feel imprisoned, even, especially if you take a look at some of the images that are there. But the challenge here is particularly with the swords, logic and intellect, which is the realm of the swords, tells us otherwise. The swords themselves, often in these images, are not trapping us at all. They're actually giving us a way out. If we look at, and I think I pulled the eights. I did. Oh, look at this. It's right on top. So if we look at the Rider-Waite Smith, because that's where I'm going to go. We look at the Eight of Swords. The swords in the Rider-Waite Smith are not imprisoning this person at all. As a matter of fact, they're only, kind of like a semicircle behind them. There's lots of opportunity for them to leave this circle of swords if they needed to. So using logic and intellect to be able to stop that irrational thought that is making us believe that we are trapped, when we feel like we can't move. It might be our self-talk, our narrative that has convinced us that we're trapped. But those same swords, like the power of the mind, is what is offering us the way out. So, yeah, I'll say this. Sometimes what's happening, not to belabor the point, what's happening with the Eight of Swords is that this card is both telling us that we feel trapped and also offering us an opening. We just have to figure out how to take it. That's,
Yes.
yeah. And then sometimes, again, the other cards can be our pathway to getting ourselves out of that sense of entrapment, that narrative that we have told ourselves that we can't get out of. That's, that's where I would go. What about you?
Yeah, again, I agree. I agree with it all, Peter. I would just maybe add a couple of things.
Yes. I'm waiting.
Well, there's this idea of having a blindfold on. So it's almost like you can't see things clearly when you have a blindfold on. And I believe that this is my disempowering card. So when I look at the Eight of Swords, and I do get this card quite often, and it's always a reminder to me about, Bonnie, why do you feel helpless? Why do you feel stuck? And a lot of times these are self-imposed limitations that we have. These are our fears, they're our doubts. If we feel stuck, it's because we feel like, oh, well, what is preventing you from moving forward? You're the only one that can make that movement to move forward. So again, we're in these situations because we put ourselves in there. And we feel like there's no way out. So this idea of like feeling like a victim, and how do we gain the clarity? So this is like my mindset card, right? I see the Eight of Swords and I'm like, where's my mindset at right now? Oh, I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling doubtful. I'm feeling lack. Okay, it's time for me to change my perspective because I'm the person who's keeping me in this situation, because I can just take that blindfold. She can take her blindfold off, right? It's kind of the same like the Devil card. Like we think that we're bound by something, but we actually have the ability to release the chains and then move forward. So it is stepping into your power, but that's a hard thing to do when we feel disempowered,
Right.
or we feel like somebody else has the upper hand. It can be a really hard situation to be in. So definitely a card of compassion, but also a card of like, that you can do this, right? Like that reminder that you can move forward and you don't have to stay here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the blindfold. Thank you for that. Because it also reminded me too, when we can't see, we often create a reality that doesn't exist. So if we're, it's often our fears come out. We think at nighttime, go into a forest and do a hike during the day, go into a forest and do a hike at nighttime. I pretty much guarantee you that your experience is going to be very different, because we eliminate what is in a lot of ways our fact checking sense that when we can't see something, then, our mind, the element of swords, is a very powerful thing that creates realities for us that just are not there. And that blindfold's a reminder that sight, that concept of seeing is believing, that ultimate fact checker is not present at that point in time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's fear of the unknown, really, right? You can't see what's going to happen. So you're afraid of it. So you just were like, well, I'm not going to do it, because if it's not going to turn out the way I want it to turn out, then I'm too afraid to go there. And I think that's what holds a lot of us back, is fear of the unknown, fear of not being able to see what's in front of us. So that's a big one.
All right.
Okay. Do you have a practical?
Well, I have a practical example that really does blend the next two cards. So can I say I'm going to pass?
Yes.
And then what I'll do is I will talk about both the energy of the Eight of Swords, which sort of guided my Eight of Pentacles action. So because I really did want to think, sometimes it's easy to say, oh, I'd use the card as a talisman. But in this particular case, I have an actual practical example that I had started while I was working overseas and had used the energy of both cards and had done so kind of willingly. Didn't use the 8 numbers because we had done something different from a magical numbers perspective. I won't get into the details there, but I absolutely used the energy of both of those cards. So
okay.
I'm hitting my pass button, which means it'll be probably a little longer in the 8 of Pentacles. So,
Okay.
But how about you?
How would I use it? Okay. I would pull the card, and I would focus on solutions and possibilities rather than dwelling on the problem, which is kind of the embodiment of this card. We're so focused on the problem that we can't see a way to get out of it. Right. So if we pull that card, and this could be some introspection too, like pulling the card and then maybe closing your eyes, or even just doing some automatic writing and being like, what is preventing me from seeing the solution? Because I'm so focused on the problems, or I'm so focused on like what could go wrong, because I think that's what holds us back too. So kind of identifying those negative self-talk that critical voice that we have in our head, and then maybe filling that with some positive affirmations. And if it doesn't happen right away, then maybe creating a positive affirmation to be like, I do have clarity, or every day I'm gaining clarity to help me get through this situation. So knowing that there's hope and possibility, rather than just always focused on like, I don't know, I can't see a way, I'm stuck here. Which, I've been in that energy right. for a long time, and that's a hard place to be. So yeah, focusing on possibilities and solutions rather than problems. And I say that all the time. My kids will say something, I'm like, focus on the solution, not the problem. So there you have it.
Interesting. Yeah. Opportunity for introspection and yeah. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right. We've got our last card.
8 of Pentacles.
Okay. And again, I'm listening. I was busy listening to you, and I can't remember which one of us is going to start with the 8.
I think it's me.
All right. 8 of Pentacles.
You did, yeah. Okay. 8 of Pentacles. I love the 8 of Pentacles. When I see this card, it's like my tarot card. It's like, oh, right, I'm doing the thing that I love. So the 8 of Pentacles for me is really about doing work that you love to do. You could spend hours doing that work and it doesn't seem like, any time has passed. It's also developing your natural gifts and talents. It's like building skills, mastering something. So this really is the card of like mastery, apprenticeship, working on something that you love to do, not being bothered by spending so much time to work out the details and do all of that. So this is great if it comes up for career, then that's probably that you're doing something that you really enjoy doing. And just, yeah, like I think other people can view this card maybe a little bit differently for that. But for me, that's such a strong, powerful message that you're doing what you love to do. And it's okay for you to build on that and to, it doesn't mean that you're a master. Like, let's say you could be at the beginning of a journey, but you're doing something that let's say you've always wanted to be a painter, but you're not really skilled at being a painter, but you just have this love of painting. You could be at the beginning stages of your painting and like really spending time and doing it. And it's just something that you enjoy doing and you're building that skill and, almost like a natural talent that comes. So I see that with the Eight of Pentacles and it makes me happy.
No, thank you. Because you can really see that kind of energy in the visual depiction of that card, right? The person in the card really does seem content in the work that they're doing, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be your career. It could just be
Yeah,
something in general that you
yeah.
love to do. So
Yeah, work. Yeah, sorry. Work is in the task that I've
sorry.
in
Yes.
front of me. Yeah.
Yes.
As opposed to work. But
Yes.
yeah, I love that. Because I do think that the card is about that, that work, right? That stuff that we do. For me, I'm going to go back to the theme I had talked about, which is the idea of movement. And I think the Eight of Pentacles is both forward oriented and consistent and methodical. So I always think first and foremost, in whatever situation that this card is depicting, it is depicting slow, steady, forward, linear, non-exponential progress. So this is not, because our reality is often, and you see these memes all the time with, this is what people think progress is, and this is really what progress is. And for those who can't see what's going on, I'm moving my hand in a nice steady upward flow for what we think progress is and moving it around, like frantically, which is really what progress is. Progress is a lot of back and forth. It is stops and starts. It's quick, then slow. And I think first and foremost, what the Eight of Pentacles does is it's an energy that's a much steadier, non-exponential energy, that it does represent that concept of slow and steady wins the race. This is the tortoise in, Aesop's fables, like in the tortoise and the hare, which I think is Aesop's fable. But for me, having grown up in and gone to French school, it was always Les Fables de La Fontaine. But I'm pretty sure that that La Fontaine took it from Aesop's fables. So it's not the card of the big idea. Like, we talk about the eights being the CEO, but this is not the visionary CEO. This is the CEO that gets stuff done. This is the CEO that rolls their sleeves up and gets in and does the work by getting dirty and doing the work with everybody else. You know what I mean? Like there's a real practical aspect to this, to the Eight of Pentacles. So, and then, everything would fit inside that slow, steady forward progress. So that's, when I think about this from the theme of movement, that's the kind of movement that I see in the Eight of Pentacles. So, I don't know.
Yes.
So, we have kind of different ways to take a look at it, but
still kind of the same.
No, kind of the same for sure. Because again, I think, I love the idea when you talk about doing something that you love, because there's real power in that as well. And that I think also embraces the concept of power inside the eights, which, is a huge theme.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right.
Okay. So do you want me to share mine first and then you finish us off with your,
sure. Yeah,
your, joining of two cards together. Okay. So again, mine is going to be quite literal. But I would say if there's something that you want to do or that you want to learn, this would be a great opportunity to do that. So again, pulling your ace or your Eight of Pentacles and getting the courage to maybe sign up for a class or go, I don't know, join a new group, right? Because if we think about pentacles, that's also our body. It's the physical body. So if there's a gym or a studio that you want to go to and you haven't gone to that yet, using this card to sort of propel you and to give you that, the power, the courage to be able to go and do that thing that you want to do that maybe you haven't done yet. So helping you with that energy to, to learn something new, join a new class or a group, and start doing something that you love to do just because you love to do it.
Well, no, that's great. That also, and the image, reminds me of the energy of a page as well, right? Where,
Mhm.
that concept of getting things started and using that energy. Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Wow. Lots of great ideas today. I will share the one I was going to talk about that blended the two. So I'll give it a bit of context. Um, I was working and living overseas for a couple of years, and my work had brought me there. And work, it was a great situation to be in. I did work that the work itself paid well, but then because I was working for the Canadian military, I was also receiving stipends for living overseas. I was getting help with housing. I was getting help in all kinds of different ways. And then in March of 2020, as most people would remember, we try and forget, the world literally shut down. And my work continued. We adjusted our work for a little bit, but I would have been working in one of the essential services that basically never stopped. And yet found myself in a situation now where, was receiving this income, which was a source of abundance, which, is very much in the Pentacles, and was like, well, what the hell do I do with this? Like, at one point we were traveling a lot, which was great, which was part of the idea of using that, but couldn't do it. We couldn't travel. Like there was nowhere to go. And I remember sitting down and, as I often would, is looking at the tarot for guidance. And I can't remember the other cards that showed up because I certainly used multiple cards, but I remember the Eight of Swords and the Eight of Pentacles.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, the idea of routine. And we had done some other, I'll call it magical or pseudo magical work through numerology that had led us to other numbers. So we didn't use the eights for that perspective, but I looked at the Eight of Swords and I thought, we're talking about that concept of feeling trapped, or where, people find themselves in a situation where they feel that they have no way out. And I'm like, and then we have that Eight of Pentacles energy where we're talking about the idea of resources and that slow and steady work. And for my reflection is, how can I combine those and use the slow and steady resources that were continuously coming in on a regular basis, despite the fact that, so it was a travel stipend and all kinds of stuff, despite the fact that travel couldn't happen. And how could I provide support for people who are either truly trapped or at least feel trapped with no way out? So we looked at providing a regular stipend to a local, by local, I mean here in our town, despite the fact that I was living overseas, and providing a steady donation that would come in on a regular basis. So cycles and repetition of the eight, and being able to support, I won't, go into detail, but being able to support people who are in a situation where either they clearly feel trapped with no way out, or they are actually trapped and no way out. And then set a plan going to support for X amount of time through that idea of repetition and cycle, and being able to use that abundance, but that resource-based Eight of Pentacles energy to try and help someone or groups of people or an organization support people to slowly pull away those swords, remove the blindfold, and move people out of that Eight of Swords situation. And I remember this to this day just because of the pairing of those two cards. It really did manifest itself into an idea that, sat in, and talk about the eights, it sat in space for 18 months. So that was the period of time, in which that cycle continued. So the reason I wanted to use it is because it really does speak of those two energies sort of working together. And for me, it was a practical example of the tarot, providing guidance and providing insight, which are often two words that I would share about the tarot, what the tarot does, and then manifested itself into something actually quite tangible. So that's the story.
That's amazing, Peter.
And then the situation never really changed, right? We were living in Europe, in Belgium, which was a country that was exceptionally hard hit with numbers during COVID, and was literally locked down. The borders themselves were shut down for 10 months. And then because of the work I was doing, that there were a few more things that, I needed to go through to be able to leave. So we were 11 months kind of inside the borders of a country that we had only lived in for 9 months or 7 months previous to that. So it's like, what do you do? What do you do when, part of your groceries are paid for, and, your housing is paid for, and you've got stipends for travel, and you're kind of stuck inside, and, you're looking at ways to be able to provide, to do something, to feel, and it probably was in some ways, and I don't want to philosophize, but in some ways it was, you felt kind of useless at that point in time where, I don't know if people felt the same way, but it was like, what do you do, right? You're locked inside your house, can't do anything. So in some ways as well, it really did manifest that idea of the Eight of Pentacles energy. Well, how can I do something? What, as you said, it doesn't have to represent work, but it is tasks being done. How can something be done? So anyways, that was that. I don't know if that story resonates with you, if it gives you ideas to be able to, to somehow blend the energy of a couple of cards, and to use it your way. The tarot is often pretty good for that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to use both cards, because we do feel trapped in the Eight of Swords, and quite often we can't really see beyond because we are stuck in those feelings of helplessness. But the Eight of Pentacles is a card of manifestation, doing what you love. So it can even be this idea of like, okay, well, if I really can't see, like, I can't look at this situation from a different perspective because I'm just stuck in it. What if I do something that I just love to do that has nothing to do with this situation? And the more that you're doing something that brings you joy, or that makes you, feel like you have purpose, or that you're helping somebody else, that helps to bring clarity into this other situation that has nothing to do with that, because everything is energy. Energy is constantly moving. So if you can move out of that, I'm feeling helpless, to, okay, I'm just going to focus on something else that makes me feel really good, or something that I'm really good at, that situation in the Eight of Swords might just sort itself out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, nothing like helping us move out of a situation. It's not that is perhaps detrimental, that we feel trapped, then increasing our own self-worth, right? Making ourselves feel like we are bringing value to another situation can sometimes help us get out of one that we haven't felt the way to be able to get out of before. So
yeah, exactly. And that's the mind. We just keep getting dragged into that, like, oh, there's no way out. There's no way out. And then you just keep spiraling, but it's almost like an interrupt needs to happen somehow, right? Like you just need to break that cycle with something completely different. And then energy can start moving again. So
we got some cards to draw. I'm excited to use the deck I've got for the very first time. I'm going to even take it out of its special box.
Wow. So do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
So
do you need some prep? Okay.
No. Yeah, you go first, because
okay.
I don't think it's not. I was going to say, I don't think it's in order. This is a deck I would have used a lot in the past, and it's not. So.
Okay. Where? Okay. So I'm using Tarot of the Witch's Garden.
Oh, okay. Well, we know
by Sasha Graham.
We know who did that one.
Yes, and the artist is Natasha Ilincic, I think. I really should write this stuff down before I start saying what decks I'm going to be using. Yes, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The art is by Natasha Ilincic, and the deck creator is Sasha Graham. Okay, so I'm going to pull a card. Oh. We talked about, it's not an 8.
I was going to say you didn't pull an 8, did you?
No, okay. I didn't pull an 8, but we talked about this card. That's so funny. So this is the Ace of Wands.
Oh, yeah, we did. Okay, we did talk about it.
Oh, that is so funny. Okay, so if you can see the card that I'm holding up. If you're listening, then it's very similar to a Rider-Waite-Smith depiction of the Ace of Wands. So it has a hand, and it's holding a wand, and the wand is on fire. Okay, what can we say about the Ace of Wands? This is a great card. It's when I think of aces, I think of them as blessings, as gifts, as opportunities that are being presented to us to go and do something with that. If you had the Ace of Wands and the Eight of Wands show up in a reading, it would be like, take this idea and run with it and do it now. But I do believe that aces also have that fleeting energy. If you're being presented with this opportunity to do something, and in this case, because it's a wand, it's that element of fire, it's those things that inspire us, those things that light us up, the things that we're really passionate about, something that could be really creative. This could even be our career. If you know your career is something that you're really passionate about, it's giving you this gift to be able to have a new opportunity or to start something new. This could be a passion project, anything that's at its beginning stages. If you don't take a hold of this opportunity and actually do something with it, that moment will pass. So it's funny that this Ace of Wands shows up in our episode of eights. Because it is about movement. So really taking this opportunity that's being presented to you. If you don't know what that is, take some time to think about it and be like, what's something that I've been really wanting to do lately that I'm really excited about? And then go from there. So I love the Ace of Wands and enjoy whatever it is that you're being guided to start. It's again potential energy. Nothing's happened. It's up to you to take action and start this thing, like start the ball rolling. So
Yeah. See, I'm going to go in a completely different direction with the Ace of Wands because I think it's everything you said. The other thing it is, though, is, for those of us who identify as male, it's phallic. You said
yes.
the Ace of Wands and the Eight of Wands. See, I would look at that and I would think fleeting energy, passion. It could also be inviting you, to find a one night stand or, a fleeting moment of passion with your partner as well. Like that,
Like
that
a quickie, right?
you got it right. It's right. Like that's that the
Yes.
eight of wands and Ace of Wands. That's quickie energy. That's
Yes, it
quickie
is.
energy. So
Yes.
that's where I would go. But you're right. The Ace of Wands for sure is the pure essence of the element itself. It is fire. So whatever fire is for you, whether again that's passion, whether or not that's initiative, whatever it happens to be, whether it's creativity, it's just the seed that plants that. Right. So, if this is showing up for you, then, there's that opportunity perhaps again to start something, that fits inside that category. So,
And I actually love that because we're at the very beginning of the new year. When we
oh
record
my
this,
goodness, yeah,
New Year's was
that's
just a
right.
couple of days
A couple of
ago, New
days ago,
Year's
yeah.
Eve.
Yeah, and
And
it'll be the first episode of the new year that we launch, right? Because it'll launch.
yeah, so we're starting
Days.
2025 with like woohoo, here's your
That's
sign
right.
to go out there and do something that you're excited about. So
That's right. Well, I was shuffling so I'm actually using. I'll give you the deck first. I'm using the Druidcraft Tarot deck, and which is one I haven't used. I'd used a lot before. I used it a lot in my teaching and in my practice, but when I got the Gaian Tarot deck, it actually replaced my Druidcraft Tarot deck because they came out. I got the Gaian Tarot deck after I got the Druidcraft. Anyways, Philip Cargome, Stephanie Cargome, Will Worthington as illustrator. And while I was shuffling, a card popped out and I was like, this is too good to be true. So I stopped. I don't know if you noticed. I just stopped shuffling, smiled a little bit, and let the Eight of Swords sit on top of the pile.
no.
This is literally what came out here. So I'm holding up the Eight of Swords. So I mean, we've talked a ton about this card already. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about the Eight of Swords other than, the tarot is maybe it's a card of affirmation, maybe it's saying, yeah, okay, great. I know you've got an episode on the eights today. The idea of, and maybe it's an omen to you and I about the idea of continuing to move forward, we've gotten through more than half a year's worth of episodes. Maybe it's like, don't sit there and feel stuck. Lots of opportunities to still have discussion. I don't know what the Eight of Swords, especially considering it is our first episode of 2025, what it has to say. More than what we've said already, but yep, that's the card. It is, yeah, it's a little bit different in the Druidcraft Tarot deck. So for those of you that are watching, I'll hold it up. For those of you that are listening, the circle is a little bit tighter.
Mm.
So it may be, if you were looking at, if you interpret cards from a visual perspective, if you were comparing the two, this might be a situation that might be a little more dire, where the opportunities to leave might be less than the Rider Waite. I always think, there's nothing trapping this person. Oh, there's no imprisonment there whatsoever. It's a wide open circle. They just feel trapped. In this one, the situation might, present itself as being a little bit harder, but for the most part, the card itself does really follow, the theme of the RWS. I don't know, anything that you would add about the Eight of Swords that we haven't talked about already?
I wouldn't add anything. I would just say it's kind of funny that that you pulled the Eight of Swords and I pulled the Ace of Wands. So if we looked at those two cards together, it would be like, okay, you're being presented with this opportunity to do something that you really want to do. A lot of times we don't take those opportunities because of our own fears. And again, because we can't see, oh, what if I do that thing that I really love, but then what if people start criticizing me, or what if I'm judged, or what? And then we stay stuck, and then we never take that opportunity. So how can you be able to take this opportunity and let go of all that judgment, let go of all those self-imposed limitations that keep you stuck, and take the blindfold off and be like, you know what, I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to see where this takes me, because it's like the universe handing me something, and I don't want to stay stuck here where I am. So I would just say reading them together to kind of give you a little bit more boost, because a lot of times we don't do anything with those aces that come into our life. We get an opportunity, a phone call, or oh, hey, let's go to this place tonight. Nah, like, I'm too tired, I don't want to go, right? We're stuck in our ways, and we don't take those opportunities. And I think this is a good time to be like, why am I not taking that opportunity? What's keeping me, stuck here? So
didn't you say that the Ace of Wands was a card at the very start of our podcast? Did you not draw?
I think I pulled the Two of Wands.
Two of Wands. That would make sense. Two people, each with an ace, but, yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I because we often talk about the idea of, of wanting, the idea of podcast was an idea that we both had before we got together. And the idea of getting together to do a podcast, I think, was very helpful in putting that idea out there, in combating the fears and taking the blindfold off and saying, you know what? There may be a handful of people out there who, actually get something from what we share. We won't know whether or not that's true unless we actually put it out there, unless we take that Ace of Wands idea and combine those two energies. I love that you did that, on the fly 2-card interpretation. Thank you for that.
Well, I think about our podcast as an Ace of Wands moment, right?
Yeah, so do I.
It was like, oh my God, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah, totally. No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And something we're both very passionate about as well, right? So
exactly.
For sure. Okay,
Peter. So how can people find you?
Well, you can always find me, website, peterwhitetarot.com, socials at Peter White Tarot. Though, I'm kind of in between courses at this point in time. I'm actually developing a course. I'm going to try my hand, I think, at my first, I'll call it non-live course. So I'll like a full production course where I won't teach the lessons live. They'll be available for consumption, but I'll do Q&A lives instead. And that'll be a course on the history of the tarot, which is something that I am dying to put together information on, but probably not until Q2 of the year, because it's going to take a little while to get together. The one thing I will state, though, is, if you're listening to this shortly after we drop it, the start of the year is a perfect time to use the tarot for guidance and insight. So if you wanted to do some work together, then pop over to my website, peterwhitetarot.com. Click on the tarot consults or the consults button. There are times there, 45, 60, 75 minutes, for whatever kind of suits you, and book a tarot consultation so that we work together one-on-one to try and provide some insight and guidance as you sort of enter 2025. So that's what I would talk about for my offerings. Bonnie, what about you?
People can find me on my website at breathewithbonnie.com. Also on Instagram at breathewithbonnie. And I love to help people set intentions. That's kind of one of the things that I'm passionate about. And yeah, the new year's a great time to set intentions. And I love helping people create an intention. So you can go over to my website as well, see the services I offer. We can either do that through tarot cards or through a private meditation session. So if that interests you, I would love to work with you so you can see all the stuff that I'm doing there.
That's great. All right. Well, on that note, we want to wish everybody, especially if you're listening to this as we just kind of enter 2025, a wonderful new year. We want to thank you again for taking the time to listen and learn with Bonnie and I on the tarot. And we certainly hope, please, if you do like our podcast, then click on the like button, share it with people who you think might enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't on whatever platform you're listening to, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of which will be a great one, by the way. Right?
Oh yeah,
well, it's be a good one.
Special guest. We have a special guest next week.
Special guest coming on our next episode of Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. So long, everyone.
Bye.